our Lily is going to be played by Blake Lively. Blake Lively, y'all. She's my dream Lily. And then when I first met Justin Baldoni, who is directing the film for It Ends With Us, I immediately wanted him to be Ryle. I just thought that he had what it takes to play that character. And the good news is he's going to be Ryle. So we have our Ryle and our Lily. I think that Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively have what it takes to bring these characters to life.
Hey besties, welcome back to my channel. You know, I'm starting to realize really quickly here, Justin Baldoni and his team at Wayfarer were trying to save Colleen Hoover and Blake Lively from themselves and their terrible decisions when it came to this film. And I realized this when I was reading through some new unsealed text messages between Justin Baldoni and his team. Now, we had a bit of this last week where we hear about how Colleen has sent Justin a text message, but the whole context of the conversation was left out because Blake Lively literally filed the motion and left everything out. Well, in full transparency, Wayfarer unsealed these and they provided all the different text messages that show what actually was going on behind the scenes and why there was like this kerfuffle with Colleen Hoover. And it comes down to Colleen getting in with Blake and Blake love bombing her essentially and allowing her to have a lot of control. And Colleen developing like reasons for why she was mad at Justin that didn't make sense nor match the way that she depicted this process on social media for years. If you know anything about Colleen, Colleen has this Facebook group called Cohorts and it's massive. And she has had a ton of success on TikTok and through cohorts where she has like this cult-like following of book readers. And she, in this group, talks about everything in regards to writing, sharing her life. And she documented the entire process from the time Wayfarer picked up this film and optioned the book to writing the script, to casting the characters like you just saw in the very beginning. Colleen says that we've got our Lily, and she's also talking to them about how she's the one that asked for Justin to play Ryle. And she was incredibly involved. And she was always saying she was so grateful because she understood that once she sells and options the rights of a book, she recognizes that the studio can do whatever they want. Now, because she sold the options of this to the studio, and she's done this before, but now moving forward, Colleen says that only she is allowed to make her books into movies. Now, Regretting You just came out like a couple weeks ago, and if we're going to go based off of her production value versus Wayfarer's production value and Sony, it's a big fat L because Regretting You, by comparison to It Ends With Us, tanked at the box office, didn't make anywhere near the 350 million internationally and domestically total for the box office for It Ends With Us. I don't even think they made 30 million. If you think about it, It Ends With Us made 50 million in the very first weekend. So Colleen wanted control of how every single facet of it came out. But you have to have constraints. You're trying to like drill down a book into like, that's 300 pages or whatever it is into 2 hours. And you're never going to be able to tell the whole story. So Blake Lively, from what you guys and we've all seen in the interviews, is there was a lot of talk about the sequel. There was a lot of talk about who's going to, direct the sequel. There was a lot of talk about Colleen having her rights. And if Colleen gets her rights, she and Blake will make the sequel and Blake will follow her anywhere. Do you remember those quips that came out? Okay. Well, I now know why the sequel isn't ever going to be made. And it's a very critical component about the way that the film ended and the sort of disagreement that occurred and something that really, really, really made Colleen mad. And I think this is partially the reason there's fights about the sequel. So if you read the book, and if you did, I'm sorry. I read it and I thought it was terrible. That's just my opinion. The character Lily is involved with this guy named Ryle, and Ryle's a neurosurgeon, and Ryle is very charming, very charismatic, but he's kind of a psychopath, and he is very abusive, he's very jealous, and he is very controlling. And he gets physical with Lily, and Lily in the book tries to get him to go to therapy, and in the book he goes to therapy. They work through Ryle's childhood trauma. They explain it away by Ryle being sort of like this kid that was part of this really catastrophic accident with his younger brother who passed away when they were children. I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but throughout the book, the premise was that Lily was going to try to fix Ryle through therapy, and they set up all these safeguards for how Ryle was going to become a better person. And then finally, after three attempts of Lily getting harmed physically by Ryle, she eventually leads. But in the book, she very clearly understands every single time she's hurt by him that he's done it intentionally. She explains it away and tries to justify it by saying that he's a victim and that he has rage issues. And then they do the therapy. And then at the end of the book, which is even more bananas, is after an attempted SA by Mr. Ryle of Lily, and he gets very vicious with her. She finds out she's pregnant, and in the book, she moves in with him while pregnant, and they live together while pregnant, and they share separate bedrooms while pregnant after he's done this horrible thing to her that required her to go to the hospital and almost go to the police. In the book, she refused to file a police report. And then in the book, which made DV survivors and shelters have to come out and speak out about how terrible this was, Lily then decided she was going to co-parent with Ryle after they had the baby because under the law, he had rights and he was going to be able to have rights to the kid. So there was no way to fight it, which made a lot of shelters be like, yo, Colleen, you have this all wrong. So the book itself is very problematic because it has a woman get abused by a man, and then she moves in with that guy while pregnant. They live together. She claims everything's fine. Then the child and the guy have a co-parenting relationship, and Ryle has half custody, and they exchange the baby. And like it's this weird dynamic where it's like, well, he's not going to harm the baby. He was only going to harm me. I trust him that he's not going to do anything to the baby. That's how the book was. So movie had to be changed because they had to consider what kind of message they were going to be sending to audiences if audiences were about to witness something very vicious happen to Lily, what it would mean if then she basically said, okay, yeah, you can move in with me. Now in the film, they don't move in together while pregnant. She gets her own apartment. That's all fiction because it didn't happen in the book. In the film, he shows up for the labor. In the book, he's there the whole time. They go to the hospital together. It's a whole thing. Okay. So in the movie, basically, that incident is the cutoff point for Ryle's and Lily's relationship. And after the baby's born, Lily tells Ryle, okay, we're not getting back together. It's over. We're done. And this is my baby. And then at the last couple minutes of the film, it's Lily with her mom and the baby, and they go visit her father's grave. And then at the very end of the film, sorry for the spoilers, y'all, she sees her boyfriend from when she was a kid named Atlas, and Atlas asks like where Ryle is, and she just says it's just her and the baby. Okay. And so the implication here is that Ryle has no relationship with them and he's out of the picture. So why does this matter? Because the way that the film ends and the way that it ends with her saying that he's out of the picture, the entire sequel can't happen because the sequel, It Starts With Us, is about the complicated relationship of co-parenting with Ryle while also being in a relationship with Atlas, who is the boyfriend from high school. So Lily becomes in a relationship with Atlas in the second book. She's co-parenting with Ryle, and there's all of these issues. But in the film, they basically wrote Ryle out and said he was gone. So you can't have a sequel. It's as simple as that. And so the only way they can really do a sequel is if they change everything, you guys. And you forget what you saw in the movie, and then suddenly they have to tell you why Ryle is back in Lily's life and why Ryle is co-parenting. So the fight for me and I see it this way, is that they don't get their sequel because they can't have a sequel because Ryle is out. The entire second book is about that complicated dynamic of co-parenting with Ryle, and then Ryle having to deal with the fact that Lily has a new man in her life. Okay. So with that backdrop, it is very evident that the fights that they were having behind the scene really came down to that. So there was a bunch of documents that were unsealed, and it was a stream of text messages between all of them. And Justin received a text from Miss Colleen, okay? And it was her sharing an article from the Wrap, and the article was titled, "It Ends With Us, Ending Explain Why Justin Baldoni Changed Ryle's Fate. The movie makes a key deviation from the ending of the book." Okay. And Colleen sent him a text message and was like asking him to delete the message. Okay. Or that they posted this article, Wayfarer posted this article about this, and they're trying to explain to readers why the ending of the film changed. And so Justin sent the group a copy of what she sent to him, and she felt like Justin was throwing her under the bus. So she sent a screenshot of the Wayfarer post, and then she said, "This is a lie. Please delete it. It does nothing but fuel the fire of what they're saying about me. If this were true, you wouldn't have asked me numerous times about Ryle's role in book 2. I have kept quiet, but this is just mean." It says, just in the post, it says Wayfair Studios, Justin Baldoni and screenwriter Christy Hall made a powerful choice on the ending of the film adaptation of It Ends With Us, removing Ryle from Lily's life entirely. Read more on the reasoning and the change and how it aligns with their message. More concerned, stop. And then if you actually go to the article and you read what the quotes were for why they had to make these changes, they give their reasons for why it had to be done. And it really doesn't say much about Colleen, so I'm still very confused, but this is what they wrote. Original draft, we had a scene in the epilogue where we see Ryle dropping off the child to Lily, and they have a short conversation. Baldoni told the Wrap. It was written in a way that showed that they had overcome a lot over the last 2 years. And I wasn't really fully comfortable with it, and No More wasn't comfortable with it. And we were trying to find a way to make it work to honor the book, but too much had to be done in such a short window to explain how they could possibly be co-parenting. Makes sense. They said they considered adding a brief dialogue explaining that Ryle was in therapy or another means of showing that he was actively putting in the work to better himself, but as they prepared to shoot the version, Baldoni decided that the most appropriate ending for Ryle would be to cut him off entirely after he got to meet his baby girl Emerson, named for his brother, in the hospital. He said, "I don't want to open up a can of worms and have a conversation about, should a man like Ryle be allowed to co-parent? What's an acceptable amount of work that someone has to do in this situation?" It was too much. He also leaned on the actual statistics to bolster that decision, knowing that reform is very rarely what actually happens. The truth is, from our research and from our partners, we know that the majority of men go back to being abusers, and that's a fact. And then it didn't feel right to tell a story about a man who was a minority in that, because that wouldn't be honoring the original intention of why we were trying to tell the story. So the best ending for Ryle was to look at his wife and kid and the life that he could have had and the life that blew up, and to walk out the door and for us not to see him again. And that was, for me, what felt the best in adapting the book and turning it into a film, is to say bye to him there. So by that choice, the whole sequel can't happen because he's trying to honor what is best for the partners he has with No More, the message it's going to send to other people. This is what upset that article is what upset her, that they had to change it because she felt that it was numerous times about, it was like they were taking a shot at her. It's a very odd response to personalize that. So Wayfair, to appease her, they ended up deleting this, and they went back and forth on what they were going to say to her. They created numerous drafts about what they could possibly explain to her. At one point, Justin offered a draft that Jamie could respond to Colleen, so removing Justin and having Jamie handle the issue. And he shared this with Jamie and he said, Justin is not out to hurt anybody, and there hasn't been one lie that's come out of his mouth. All he's been doing is singing the praises of you and everybody else and sticking to the message of the movie, which you knew he cared about from the beginning. He asked you about the second book to understand the trajectory of Ryle's character as he was developing the script, which you also understood as he included you on that decision. The above headline is taken completely out of context, but that is not our doing. And as there is a PR war going on, and we are the ones that are not leaking anything or trying to destroy anybody, this entire situation was set up to be a smear campaign against Justin, and it clearly backfired. Justin didn't want any of this, and he's loved and adored you for 5 years. If you actually read the interview, you'll see he says exactly as it happened, which was a decision that you also supported. It had nothing to do with the second book or not wanting to be a part of it as an actor or changing Ryle's fate. It had everything to do with, after seeing an edit of the movie, realizing that we did not need to open up a can of worms and show an abuser co-parenting without showing all of the necessary work that had to have happened to make that possible. You also know this as he involved you every step of the way. Wayfarer is also not talking and are not firing back. We are continually speaking highly of everyone. We did not ask to be in the situation. This was created and easily could have been avoided. So there must have been some suspicion from, either Blake or from Colleen that Justin edited the movie this way and ended the movie in the script this way so that there could not be a sequel. That's what I'm getting from this. Like he had to clarify to her that it had nothing to do with the second book or not wanting to be part of it as an actor or changing Ryle's fate. So Justin didn't want to do a sequel. Justin didn't want to work again with Blake. And they're thinking, oh, he just changed it because he didn't want to work with Blake, which really doesn't make sense because the script had already been written. So he does editing and he ends him from there, cutting him out completely. Ultimately, it gets drilled down. Jamie doesn't send the message, but Justin does. And it's much shorter. It's, I'm sorry that you're hurting. I want you to know that I've not lied to you or spoken ill of you. I'm also not talking about my experience. I've been sticking to the same message of the movie, which you know I care deeply about from the beginning. The headline is taken out of context, which you will see from the interview. I spoke about this multiple times, and they also don't include everything I say, none of which has anything to do with changing his trajectory in the second book, which I, of course, asked you about multiple times to understand where the story goes. You supported my decision to remove him from the end of the movie, and there has been no talk about him in a sequel. We do not control the headlines. Since this is the first time I've heard from you, I just want you to know that I've deeply cared about you for the past 5 years, and that hasn't changed. So again, like reiterating to her, it's not what you think. It's not about the sequel. It's not about that at all. She responds to him and says, it just feels like I'm on an island here when the hate is being directed at me. You guys posting that article and allowing it to fuel the comments is hurtful. And the timing of it just feels like you're worried about your image and not the women who are behind the story. I know things took an awful turn and I felt forced to choose when I did not want to, but the back and forth articles from both camps are just so upsetting and ridiculous. It's making everyone working on this movie look immature. Everyone is out there trying to save themselves. And now this has turned into a huge mess. And I know you guys think I've made decisions for certain reasons, but I have felt the rift from long before I ever was in contact with Blake. It started with me not being allowed to read the script until I was sat with the readers, and then all of the interviews made it seem like you included me in the script from the beginning. Then the whole documentary thing where I said no so very many times, and the book when I asked you guys to at least donate a portion of the proceeds to DV, and then I was told that the only way a donation would be made is if I took 1% of and donated that myself. Then the whole tattoo thing and all the text of you blaming Blake for that, reiterating that she didn't read the book every time. I just try to ask you what to say to readers. I have been disappointed personally by your actions many times. I appreciate that you haven't directly said anything negative. That's how it should be. But you are grown men with a platform. You know how to use it to protect your image. Please don't continue to use it to harm me or mine. That's all I'm asking. So Justin then, after all of this happens, he sends a bunch of screenshots of his conversations with Miss Colleen that actually show that she saw and read the script before meeting with the fans. And she made a video where she asked fans to sign up for this meet and greet where they would go through the script. She gave notes about how Ryle was portrayed in the book or in the film. She was confused about why they didn't have him going to therapy in the movie, and how the way it ends with Lily being so nice to her father, and how she mentions to Ryle that he should go to therapy. And he says he will. It concerns me based on the feedback from the book that the script, in a sense, is almost too forgiving of these men. And that may be just because it's a script and there's more that will come through the acting. But I don't know how I feel about changing Ryle to have never gone to therapy, because most of these men don't change, and almost feels like we're alluding that they can. I haven't figured out what I would change in regards to this, though. So let me give it some thought. Colleen, it appears her opinion was that the way she wrote the book and how he went to therapy in the book was the appropriate way to address this. But the way she addressed it in the book is what got her the most backlash, because she was trying to say that therapy could fix him. What we know about domestic abusers and men like this is that most of them are narcissists, and therapy will not change their behavior. And so even suggesting that therapy can help them is also dangerous, because then you're allowing the narrative of explaining his trauma as a reason for abuse, which doesn't help the story either. I think they're walking a very delicate balance of how to navigate the reality of what happens with abusers and how they escalate over time, and Colleen's thought process that therapy could potentially fix Ryle, which then explains why she's co-parenting and allowing, him to take care of the baby, and why she's still involved in his life in the second book. We have to remember the feedback of what the domestic violence shelters were telling her when she wrote this book. And they were trying to say to her, you tried to act like all of this was based out of Ryle's trauma, and that as long as he went to therapy, everything would be fine. But yet, your own scenes in this book dictate how sadistic he was when he made choices to harm Lily, and it doesn't show a man that has a temper problem and that something can be fixed with therapy. It shows a man who's calculated, methodical, and violent. And this message is dangerous to send to women, because it's like she thinks somehow in her mind that Ryle was only doing this out of temper, but he wasn't. It was very methodical in the book. With that said, what that means is that the entire second book of why she is with Ryle and why they reconcile, not getting back together, but co parenting, and then allowing him to have a continued voice in the child's life, along with the interactions between the three of them, it doesn't even make sense, because under Massachusetts law, it says that where physical or sexual violence has occurred between parents, any form of unsupervised visitation or custody with the abusive parent is considered contrary to the best interests of the child and not permitted. So her book didn't even say go to the police. Lily never reported any of this to the police. She never went to a domestic violence shelter. She never got help for herself in either the book or in the film. Okay. And so the entire conversation throughout all of this was that Lily's failing her child by not helping herself and not keeping her from the baby, or keeping the baby from Ryle. And what I see is that, Justin's trying to protect Lily, the character, so that people don't hate her for the choices that she makes of going back and allowing him in her life and moving in with him and all of these different things. So he's in some ways almost trying to save her from herself, I guess, if that makes sense. And I think he's being strategic, because Wayfarer doesn't want to send the wrong message to young, impressionable women. And this is something that they deeply care about. Was it in his place to sort of say, like, Blake made changes about the tattoo and it cost us money? Was it fair for him to put her in that? No. Was he perfect? No. I mean, they're all dealing with egos here, all three of them. Okay. But what I see in these communications is not smear campaign. In fact, more of these text messages prove the opposite. I don't see that he was being unreasonable. Jamie explains that they couldn't make the donation in her name legally, and it was their lawyers saying, we can't make it for your name. So if you want to make a donation in your name, you need to do it yourself. Makes sense. They explained that they were never going to have, her in the documentary, and they scrapped it very early on. They, tell her that and remind her that she was involved in the script writing from the beginning. So again, the truth and what Wayfair has said from day one is that this really is about the rights for the sequel. Okay. Colleen wants the rights back because she wants to create the sequel. She wants to tell it her way and what she thinks is the best way. Well, we've seen the way that she and Blake edited this film together and what a slop mess it was. We saw and we witnessed how they decided to promote it, which was a slop mess. Why do they think they're going to do the sequel any better? So now there's all this pressure on him because they changed Lily the way that they wanted to see Lily. And he's trying to say, I'm trying to show young women that they have a way out and it's redemptive for her to leave, not stay and allow him to be with the baby. Justin was taking feedback from the domestic violence shelters the entire time. It is so obvious. And they weren't. So, really, at the end of the day, who cares about the domestic violence of the women? Colleen says that her dad was allowed to see her as a child. And so that it's true to her story that he never abused her. And so that's why the story is the way it is. But that story doesn't even make sense in today's society. So it's too much. It's just too much. So honestly, in a way, what this looks like to me is that Miss Colleen and both Colleen and Blake didn't like the fact that they were getting backlash for the way that they decided to promote the film. They didn't like any criticism of the fact that this was a film that glorified domestic violence or that there were changes to what occurs in the trajectory of the character Ryle, because ultimately they don't want this idea that they can't do the sequel. It's all about the sequel. Small choices along the way to alter the story to influence and help young women and improve the outcome of the life for the child, right? That Justin and his team made with help of domestic violence shelters were not what Colleen and Blake wanted. And they certainly want to make the sequel. They want the money of that sequel. And I understand why Justin wouldn't want to be involved in a sequel, because the experts are saying that story that you're telling me about would be even more damaging to sell. It would send an even worse message to people. And so they're blaming the backlash that both of them rightly should be receiving, and Wayfair's not giving to them, but this is coming from her fans on him so that they can probably explain why they need to do the sequel without him. It's all about the sequel, you guys. It's all about the sequel. And it's all about neither one of them, Colleen and Blake, not wanting to take the criticism. And I'm not saying Justin was perfect, but it does appear that they were trying to be sensitive to victims here. And I appreciate the care that they took. Even if it wasn't a perfect film, they at least tried. But this evidence at least shows me that the fight between Colleen, Blake, and Justin was about the sequel. It was never about sexual harassment, and it was never about a smear campaign, which is what Wayfair has said all along. So, what are your thoughts about that? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.